airport travel. Have you talked about it?
Yeah, surprisingly good.
Okay.
Because the main thing was that because I've been meditating a lot in the past few months, I was not bored. And because I wasn't bored, I could like so the main thing was I was a bit upset, so I just had some wholesome books to read. And then when I finished the wholesome books, I was just like, well, I'm just gonna sit and breathe, and that was fine.
Oh, it's amazing.
Congratulations. You
Which
made it.
for, like a, 2 12-hour flights, that's quite unusual. Quite enjoying this. I'm trying to keep this up in London, but London has way more distractions than a plane.
Yeah.
Like trying not to look at the ads and trying not to look at all that stuff, or trying not to get distracted by it, basically. Because you only look at an ad on the tube when you're bored.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
Right?
They're very
That's why
conveniently
they have the
placed
ads
as well
there.
to grab attention.
Yeah, they have the ads because people are so bored that they can't even sit with their own breath or their own thoughts for like a few seconds.
It's true.
And it's
Very
like,
true.
oh, they're just like not looking, they can't stand to look at the person in front of them on the escalator, so they have to look left and right, and oh, there's the ads. So I'm quite enjoying this new setting of trying to just remain present and not get too distracted. And obviously you can be present with an ad, but why would you want to be? Because it's not very wholesome.
Especially since the intention of the ad is to want you to want something.
Exactly. Yeah. That's 100% it. I was like,
well,
no, I'm quite happy.
You can do other things with the ad, and one of the things you can do is look at the artwork, because often ads, billboard ads, etc., like that, are intentionally artistic to catch the eye.
Yeah.
In order to subconsciously get you to want something, but you can just enjoy their art.
I just watched your interview about the industrial psychology too, and it was excellent. It was definitely insightful.
Debbie, when we turned the video recorder on, you were asking a question. Can you ask that question again?
Yeah, so it was in relation to what you said prior to that. You said vows and oaths are more likely to be assumed to be an ordinary people thing, whereas enlightened beings do not really consider vows and oaths to be something spiritually maybe higher on the hierarchy. Is that what you said?
Yes, that's basically how you could say it. That you could say that, in fact, that we can think of it as staircase or stair-step ladders.
Yeah. So
and
my
that there
is,
are right, and so there's kind of various stages of enlightenment, as you were, or various steps along the path. And that we can also understand that ladder then, or that staircase that we're talking about, is part of that ladder is submerged.
Right.
And that above the water would be then the noble stages above that. And then the lower part underwater would be the various stages of of ordinary life. And at the bottom baseline would be absolute wrong view, which can be stated as, I can get away with anything.
Yeah, right.
I can get away with it. That's the baseline. So that's kind of the bottom of the pool, that you don't get much lower than absolute far out a criminal who knows that he can get away with any criminal activity that he cares to engage in.
Yeah.
Okay. We've had leaders like that throughout history. That when they say absolute power absolutely corrupts, what we're talking about is it takes one down to the very lowest quality of humanity. And so this is the baseline. And the rest of society, how do we deal with people who are at that lowest level, is try to make boundaries upon them.
Yeah.
All right. And so those boundaries sometimes, if this guy is so strong and so powerful and so harmful and causes so much suffering, then people have to organize together to put a stop to it. And there's various ways that that can happen. One is to try to undermine his support. In other words, we can talk to, on an individual level, individuals who are in his army to try to convince them to leave his army so as to not make him so powerful.
Yeah.
Or there's underground maneuvers and all kinds of stuff that we can have. But this is basically where all of this stuff gets started, is an argument between ordinary right view and wrong view. And the ordinary right view is basically stating to this ordinary wrong view of you cannot get away with it. You can't get away with it.
Yeah.
We're going to make sure you can't get away with it. We're going to undermine your troops. We're going to raise our own forces. We're going to hire policemen in case of individual or family mobsters. Or if it's a whole nation, we're going to build a nuclear weapon. But we're going to prove to you that you're not going to get away with it.
Right. So more intrusive intervention for them, would you say?
Okay. So this is the basis for war. This is the basis for police. This is the basis then for armies and things like this, is those who have an ordinary right view that have a kind of an awakening in the sense that they know the difference between right and wrong. And then we're having to deal with a whole bunch of people who do not care about the distinction between right and wrong. They're only caring about themselves and how they can survive or how they can gain advantage and whatnot like that. Now, here's the kicker in all of this. Each one of us, every one of us inside, is a mixture of these two stages.
Yeah.
At various points. Sometimes we feel like a nut and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we think we can get away with it and sometimes we say, you're not going to get away with it.
Yeah.
And then sometimes the answer to that is, yes, I can get away with it. And we have these internal wars and dialogues between this wrong view and this ordinary right view. This is the basis then for your question that we need to straighten out, that there's a couple of these steps that are absolutely below water level. And so they're in a conflict with each other, and that ultimately the ordinary right view brings in the big guns because they're not winning with police and armies and whatnot like that. That they're winning by bringing in the big guns, religions, priests, gods. Okay, if we can't teach you that you can get away with it, because they can say, well, I can get away with it, and then they'll say, oh, the other time will say, no, when you die, we'll get you then. Ultimately, you're not going to get away with it.
Yeah.
Okay, this is where the idea of 10 commandments come from. That ultimately the authority is there, except that going back to that word authorities, is ultimate authorities are just as corrupt as ordinary power. Also corrupt.
So kind of using the guilt and shame strategies to regulate behavior at that point, when the negative attitude, wrong attitude have gone too far past the boundaries and past the baseline, I would say. Do you think?
Well, yes, what you're talking about is all of the psychological tools that we didn't mention. First, we were talking about physical, but basically, even when we're getting into talking about religion and commandments, now we're introducing the issue of fear.
Yeah.
Which is much more of a psychological issue.
Yeah.
And then being a good psychologist, you bring in its friends. Fear has a friend. Guilt, remorse, rebellion,
resentment, all of that.
Exactly. All of that stuff comes into play when we try to control other people's behavior. We can only do it by enticing them or promising them something which hooks into their greed,
Yeah.
or we can frighten them or give them an option of punishment. Okay? Doesn't this sound strikingly similar to the Buddha's understanding of the second noble truth, the cause of suffering?
Yeah. I
Yes,
was going to
and
say,
so
it sounds more like at that point, all of these strategies are targeted at the survival level being, you know, to use fear would be to utilize that automatic processing, whereby people, when they try to do something, they automatically feel guilty and will stop and, you know, not engage in
yes,
that behavior.
in fact, there are various societies that have grown up, or various civilizations that have foundations very similar to what we were talking about. In fact, what we can say is that the old Mediterranean culture that still exists, but it doesn't exist completely around the Mediterranean, but the southern and the eastern and into Greece and whatnot like that, especially places like Algeria, Morocco, um, uh, Tunisia, that area, Algeria, around the Mediterranean, as far and also into the east, has a different culture than we have in the West. In the West, we can define our culture as a guilt ridden culture, and in the Mediterranean culture is an honor culture.
Yeah.
Okay. And so people have to behave in order to save face in the community. All right. So basically, what we can say then is that in the Pali, there are two words, Hari and Opata. Hari and Opata can be seen as different in the sense, by the way, that these are traits for ordinary people to understand and to learn. So this is kind of a basic or a child's teaching of in Buddhism. Is Hari is embarrassment or shame, and Opata is guilt, which is completely different.
Yeah.
All right. But you can look at it. Here we go with this honor society is built upon honor, which means I can do anything that I want to do so long as I don't get caught at it.
Yeah.
To where in the guilt system, the guilt means is that, oh, I have caught myself, and now I have to punish myself in the hopes that then they won't punish me.
Right.
This is why we say I'm sorry when we make an apology. Apologies can be made without you feeling sorry.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, in the Thai language, the word is ko tut. And that's a very interesting word that way because the word tut is your hind side, your backside, the butt, and ko is to beat. So please beat me is basically how they apologize in Thai language, which is exactly upside down from the way that they say it in America. I'm sorry, which means I have already beaten myself.
Yeah, and that's the difference between collectivist and individualist society, where I'm sorry means I have taken care of my problem, but in
Uh-huh.
Pali, in Thailand, it's more like, yeah, I have made an error and I deserve the consequence from the society.
From the society, exactly. And so one is communal
Yeah,
and the other one is individualistic. One is capitalistic, the guilt society,
yeah,
and the other one is socialistic.
yeah,
And they're
So in
both
Thailand, we
ordinary.
live in a socialistic society because they say katut when they're making an apology, and you're left with capitalism and rape, pillage, murder, and all the kinds of things that go along with capitalism because they have the word I'm sorry built
mhm,
into it. In other words, I can get away with it if I say I'm sorry.
right.
That's part of it. But the whole real point about being sorry rather than saying you're sorry is that the guilt means that you want to make up for it. You want to have retribution. You want, in fact, as it were, um, uh, reconciliation.
Mhm.
All right, because let's look at it in another way is that if two people in Thailand have a really blow up a great big argument, let's say between the customer and the store, the likelihood of that customer ever going back to that store is very remote. That once it's cut, once you have a great big explosion, it's gone. And you can see how that's in Buddhism in the sense of it, if it's dangerous, stay away from it. Okay,
Right.
and so that relationship has become dangerous for both of them to stay away from it. In the West, the whole idea is, oh no, Christianity teaches you go and kiss and make up, which means you've got to resolve the situation, which means that both parties have to see it. Guess what? We don't want to do it. And so now we're caught in the bind of, do I just allow myself to just forget the whole thing and go about my merry way, or am I going to be caught in, do I have to go fix this thing that's broken?
And that's the root of conflict, where a person doesn't feel like making up but is socially obligated to.
Precisely. There is often social obligations to kiss and make up. Now here in Thailand, they've got a fallout, or they've got a backup to that. And you can say that backup is grandma, because this is a matriarchal society, and it is the grandmas that will go and patch things up between, say, his son and his dad, who happens to be the dad is the son of grandma. Okay, and so she's got a vested interest in getting these guys back together, but in Thai culture, they don't have a vested interest in doing so. Okay. And so in Thailand, father and son, if they have a blow up, more than likely they're going to get put back together whether they want it or not, and they're going to learn to get along with each other and get over it. To where in the West, because of this internal conflict, father and son can be separated for a lifetime.
Yeah.
And neither one of them is willing to give in, and there's nobody that's going to come in and intervene. So that's part of the difference in the society. And by the way, you can say, well, what about in the West? Why doesn't grandma come in? The answer to that is, look at the women's status in Western society.
Right.
In Thailand, women are supposed to. They're on top. They're in charge. That's their job, is to go patch things up.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So all of this is that foundation in there to that question that you were asking, which has to do then that what happens then at that point in time, because a lot of people would think then that this staircase then has to do with whether someone is ordained or not, because it doesn't. That everyone, when they do ordain, ordains with one foot still in the water. They're still underwater, okay? That's expected. In fact, you couldn't expect nobles who are already noble and already understand the Dhamma. They would only take refuge within the Dhamma for the sheer simplicity of having a place to hang out, because they already know how to hang out.
Yeah.
All right. So everyone who joins the Sangha is, let us say, an ordinary person. And we can define that ordinariness is in basically looking for magic. Everyone at an ordinary level is looking for magic, and the nobility is the ones who have given up that search and are looking for something real now.
Right.
Okay. And so this is one of the ways of looking at what is the distinction between the noble and the ordinary people, is the ordinary people are still looking and locked in that conflict within themselves between ordinary view, right view, and their own wrong view. And we're caught in a conflict between ourselves in that level. Surprisingly enough, Freud figured that out on his own and labeled it very well and very properly. But his labels were confusing to ordinary people. And so Byrne came in and changed the terminology so that even idiots like us can figure it out.
Yeah.
That's that dialogue between the parent ego state and the child.
Uh-huh.
And we can also understand it from the from various experiments and things like that. That a child who has been raised by wolves, say, or in the wild, has
Mhm.
wild characteristics. That humans are animals. We are wild. We are barbarians. We're out there for survival and for getting anything that we want at best we can. And civilization then is that superego, that parent ego state that comes in to socialize humans
Mhm.
based upon the nesting instinct.
Yeah.
That you, because part of the self-preservation is that we need to be in a nest in order for protection. So
Mhm.
there's part of the internal conflict, is the conflict between the nesting instinct and the self-preservation instinct. So the instincts have conflict built right into them. That's something a lot of people
Yeah.
think. They think all what we need to do is just to get out of the instincts into our wisdom and see things for sure. No, actually, part of the situation is to also be wise enough to resolve the conflicts that we each have between our various instincts.
Right. And it kind of matches with the developmental stages of a child. So when they're
Precisely.
kids, they are basically learning and being socialized. So they are learning to set boundaries and define what's right or wrong. But by the time they are a young adult, they are capable of making conscious decisions. And that's why I think wisdom has such a high correlation with experience and older age. So people are finally able to see that they don't need those boundaries anymore, or more likely the boundaries become less efficient for them.
Well, just let's look at that because you just hit something extremely important. We can see the rules and the boundaries of society that are impressed upon a child
Mm-hmm.
very, very similar to things like crutches
Yeah.
or walking aids. Maybe someone's holding your hand. That, in fact,
Yeah.
one of the ways that children actually learn to balance and walk is when mommy will reach out her hand just to hold the hand of the child so that the
Mm-hmm.
child can use mom's hands and her steadiness in order to learn to walk rather than just stumble and fall and stumble and fall and stumble and fall.
Yeah.
Okay. But as the child then learns how to walk, he wants to reject mom's hand. That's all of the part of it. I can walk on my own right now, thank you very much. And then at other
Yeah.
times, oh, I want mom's hand again.
Yeah, and that may be the cause for, this stage at where people kind of have this natural rebellion towards the shoulds, oughts, or musts. Um, Especially during, I would say, teen, adolescence, that period when children are rebelling and they don't want to obey the authority figures.
Precisely. So we can take that a little analogy of a child as they're growing up, learning to walk, and then both rejecting and clinging to mom's hand, that back and forth that we have. First we're
Yeah,
afraid, and then we want freedom, and then we're afraid again, and so we grab her hand again, etc., like that. This is exactly an excellent analogy for how we learn to deal with the other kinds of aids and assistances, or which we can call the rites, rules, and rituals.
mm-hmm.
That by the time that we're adults, we can begin to see how things actually are, and we don't have to follow the rules anymore. We can look at where we're going.
Yeah,
And that it's all built upon safety. That in sense, AI and having self-driving automobiles actually is humanity's bringing that into fore. In other words, if you had an AI system of automobiles who had a whole bunch of rules, then that would be old software. In my day, when we wrote programs, we wrote rules, right?
Yeah.
Now AI is different
Yeah.
software with different processing, and the AI is there to figure out, and they have very, very few rules. In other
So
words, cars are not out there following traffic rules. They're following a different rule, and that is go as fast as you can and don't hit anything. Those are the only two rules you've got.
yeah, that highlights something very interesting, because what has changed for AI is that their learning ability has increased exponentially, right? They're right now becoming more self-learning.
Guess
So
what? Your self-learning can do the same thing when you get out of a rule-based
yeah,
mentality.
yeah, that's what I was going to
This
say.
is
Maybe
then
that
the
is a
distinction.
determinant.
This is then the distinction. This is really excellent. This is then the distinction between ordinary right view that's rule bound and noble right view, which is investigation. It's all
Right.
about the investigation. And the Buddha figured this out 2,500 years ago, that it is wisdom, it's the investigation, it's the power of observation, it's the looking and looking and looking at things over and over again. And then we begin to see the territory like it is, and we know how to maneuver. We don't have to maneuver by a map or a set of rules or anything like that. We can actually see where we're going in life now,
Mm-hmm.
which means that we're going to throw out all of the old rules, which the Buddha calls sila bhatta paramasa, which is in fact the nesting instinct, and start operating from a wisdom instead of looking at what we're doing, looking at where we're going.
I have a
Yes,
question.
Hania, yes.
Can we go back to this? You mentioned that ordinary people see it as magic, and noble people see it as reality, or something like. What's the statement exactly?
Yes.
So, an example. I see that I see the synchronicity, for example. Something happens, and I think it's magic or reality. Like, what's
Well, what you
is
can
that?
say is instead, isn't it marvelous that you can wake up and see that things are almost like that we live in a giant clock, and that the gears turn in ratios, etc., like that, and things just happen that way. Many, many incidences. One is that I'll mention a song, and the lady who's listening to me in a private conversation says, that particular song is on the record player right here. We just played it last night. Another example is I give an example of liking what you're doing and talk about dishwasher. And the guy turns out immediately gushes that he's a professional dishwasher. And this happens over and over and over again. Recently, let's say it was last Saturday morning, that I had a call that had conflicted with the timing of the Skype call that we do, Sangha UK. And when I finished that call and came on to onto the Skype US, Parker had just clicked the button to finish the call. And I saw him and he saw me, but the buttons had already been clicked and it was over. But that was enough for both of us to understand this is an instant of synchronicity. This was brilliant because it only lasted 1 second. There was only 1 second that could have happened. That I came on just as he was leaving. All right. But there's many, many things like that. Now, here's part of the problem. Is that the magic is that once we begin to open up and see how things are so interconnected, we get the idea that we can control it. If I only get this or that little skill, if I only get a little bit better in meditation, I'll figure out how I can fix it. I can control it. That's where magic comes in.
Okay, so you intentionally trying to project something.
Right, we start to project on it as I did it, or not look at that, but look at me.
Oh, I
We
see.
turn it into selfishness. That's the magic. That's the transition that is made, and that it's based upon more wishful thinking than actual observation. The more we observe, the more we realize that there's so much of that synchronicity happens that all we could do is just be in awe of it.
This is the way you remove yourself out of it, just saying,
Just look at that, just wow, isn't that marvelous? But that means that we're actually looking at what's happening, as opposed to trying to make something out of it.
Yeah, it feels good to do it instead of saying I created it or
or look at me, what a grand boy I am because I can see things you can't see. Instead, whenever synchronicity happens, I talk to the students about it immediately, and everybody says, yeah, that's really interesting that this stuff happens that way, that we make connections. But that's real. It's real because we don't live in an infinite society. We live in a closed environment almost, that we are interconnected. And
oh no, did we lose him?
Something's happened.
That's synchronicity. That's magic.
Lack of synchronicity.
That's not magic, actually. It's poor quality. Manuel, how are you doing there?
It's very cool that we were talking about this because actually right now I'm doing my bachelor thesis in psychology about synchronicity. So quite a synchronistic thing going on.
Yeah.
And it's amazing, yeah.
I just lived through one today, just like a couple hours ago. And that was really cool. Just
tell me about it. How was it?
Oh, you're back. Oh,
yes.
Tell me about my synchronicity. Okay. I made myself rice porridge, and while I was making it, a friend of mine who's in the US was just thinking about it and texted me at that moment that he wishes he had some rice right now, boiled rice, and I sent him a picture of what I'm eating now. And he's like, this is the first time I've ever thought about rice, boiled rice, ever. And voila.
Now, Debbie, to continue answering your question and using the staircase and the analogy and the water line as to the state of mind a person is in, one can in fact become noble and return to lay life and be of a great advantage. One of the major reasons that that can happen is normally because the family will need one. But this is actually common and known of, and within the Sangha, and this, by the way, is well known within the Sangha in Thailand. This is kind of the way that it operates, is that one can actually become a monk and disrobe and become a monk again 7 times in his lifetime, because that actually happened in the time of the Buddha. That gives people enormous flexibility. That just because, now there's a difference between leaving the Sangha, disrobing, and going and joining a different religion.
Oh.
That's not the same thing, but rather that you stay with your, how to say it, you stay in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and you continue to associate with them, but now you can do it because of family restrictions or other things like that. An example of that is that I was doing quite a lot of running my mother's family business when she was really, really in her advanced old age. But then she got into an automobile accident. She couldn't drive anymore. At that time, the manager of the organization had quit. And that meant that I had to take even more responsibility for this or close it down. And I had to make a choice. And that choice was to become disrobed as a monk.
Right.
So that I could now handle the books. Because so far I was successful at not having to do the books. That even though I
Right.
did the payroll was only money on paper. In other words, I would do the payroll, hand it to my mom, and then the checks were written or the money was taken out and the payroll was done like that. When she was no longer able to do that, that was the line that I made for myself. Now I have to disrobe in order to take care of business. However, there was also some other reasons that were in there, because the situation that I was in, I wanted to remain close in North Carolina. And that at that particular time, the Lao temples began to have trouble over who owns the temple property. In Thailand, that's not an issue, because when a place is ordained, fully ordained, the deed for that land is given to the king as a present, but it's then administered by the Bureau of Religious Affairs. So all religious facilities in Thailand do not have any political squabbles. In the United States, however, religious organizations have mortgages on their buildings, which means who owns that building in the bank's mind became a major issue, because people want to say, oh, well, I run this temple because my name is on the mortgage. And I want to sell the buildings because now we bought it for $150,000 and I can sell it for $1 million now. Ha ha! And you guys can go find another place.
And there's
Okay,
corruption.
Right. And so here I am, a monk, winding up in court suit after court suit, in court, time after time. The first one I got into was in Amarillo, Texas, and they actually invited me to go out there. Well, now that I'm a monk who speaks English and knows how to handle American courts, that means that every Buddhist court suit in the United States needs my attention, right? That was a good time for me to get out.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
And that shows how dynamic the Thai system is. They recognize that humans are not consistent, and that's okay because circumstances change, right? So that flexibility, I think, is something we all could benefit from.
Well, while I was in North Carolina, one of the lawyers in one of our meetings just kind of mentioned that about half the lawsuits in North Carolina right now is over who owns what church property.
Yep.
So it is a major problem as churches begin to close.
Right.
It also can be a major problem when the property increases, and then there's conflict. But anyway, getting back to the point is that is part of the Buddhist culture that there is time to go to the woods and there is time to go home and to take care of business. Because if you don't go home and take care of business, then the whole group of people is going to be suffering. And what advantage do you have by going into the woods when the whole town is burning down, basically, when all you'd have to do is just step in and everything is set right? So the whole permission thing is to move in and out of the Sangha according to choices and abilities that you make. So that means then that that there are on some occasions, some very, very high quality, high class people out there in Thai society for some reason or another, that they're not all in the Watts.
Right.
Because even though they got that nobility, another way of looking at it is that the Sangha can be seen as a hospital. How many hospitals do you know of that once someone goes into the hospital, even though they're cured after 2 or 3 weeks, they stay years and years in the hospital because they like it there?
Nobody likes a hospital.
Well, a lot of people like the Sangha. Once you get into it, get the cure, there's no reason to leave, except there sometimes are reasons to leave, but the reasons are often on the outside, family organizations, business problems, rice. In fact, the first time that it happened in the Sangha of the Buddhist time was when a man had to disrobe because his mother was not capable of doing all of the work of harvesting the rice at the time, and she needed him to help with the rice. The next year it was okay, and she did it fine. The year after that, okay. But then the third year, he needed to go back again.
Mm.
And the Buddha says, fine, go do the work that you need to do. And when you come back, you can take up the robes again.
Yeah.
In the very beginning, in fact, the ordination was ehipasiko, echo bhikkhu.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, come and see for yourself, come and be a bhikkhu. It was intended to be short term from the very beginning. And the ordination was very easy in the beginning. It got more and more ossified and more formalized over time due to the influences of ordinary people mixing with the Sangha.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't remained noble.
Right. So
That doesn't mean it became completely not noble. That's the part that most Westerners have a problem with. Yes, the Buddha Sangha started out noble, but it got really encrusted with ordinary things we can call Buddhism itself. But that Buddhism that was covering over the actual noble Sangha was more of a protective wrap. And it has preserved and protected the teachings of the Buddha for 2,500 years now. And it was in the time of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa to say, let's let the noble Dhamma out and open for anyone. That this is not an issue of ordination, this is an issue of enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Sorry,
Yes.
go on.
So it's seemingly easier for a man to go to the Wat and stay there, even if he has kids. Now, for women, it's a little different, because once you have
Absolutely.
kids,
Absolutely. But it should not be in the regard that, in fact, we just talked about this, that if a man has young children, then that would be, even in Thai society, a prohibiting factor for him becoming a monk. In fact, there's a whole lot of reasons that, in fact, one cannot become a monk if he is in debt. He cannot become a monk if he is wanted by the authorities for any reason. Okay, so if somebody wants him because of money, or somebody wants him because he's done something wrong, in other words, the Sangha is not a hiding place. This is not sanctuary for wrongdoers.
mm-hmm.
And a man has obligations to his children, that if he is going to become a monk, while he's got a 10-year-old son, or maybe a 10 and an 11-year-old kid, or 8 and 9, something in that range, he had better make very sure that his family is okay that he goes and becomes a monk for a while, and that his kids are going to be very, very well taken care of. Also remember that every time that a monk ordains in Thailand, one of those things is that you've got to have your mother's permission to ordain.
Wow.
And your mother is not going to allow you to ordain if you've got a 10-year-old child.
Oh.
Right.
And so there is social stuff built into that.
Mm-hmm.
That the Westerners, they don't even know about all of these tiny little details that are there, because none of you have been to Thailand to actually go through the ordination process, which is when you find out about all of this stuff. Okay, you've got to be in good health, in a good mental mood. You've got to have your mother's permission. You've got to be completely debt-free. You can be broke, but that's not the issue. But in fact, the Bhikkhu Sangha has been big with the immigration. In other words, they're both organizations within the government. The Bureau of Religious Affairs and the Immigration Department work very closely hand in hand to make it easier on the Westerners who are ordained, but they're also closely inspected. And they don't have to do any of that stuff with the Thais. They let the Thai society take care of all of that.
Mm-hmm. So that again points to the boundaries that we were talking about, those social boundaries and psychological boundaries that are needed to make sure that people cultivate at least a positive attitude, if not at the level of enlightened beings, right?
Mm-hmm.
But once that's taken care of, I think then monks or student monks are probably given more flexibility regarding what's right or wrong, and the boundaries are kind of start to dissolve, would you say? Because
Yes, not only that, but you're pointing at something very beautiful, and I like that. I hadn't even thought about it this way, and that is that people of wrong attitude are not allowed or invited into the membership in the Sangha. That the Sangha wants people of right ordinary attitude, because that's going to be the foundation that they need to move from that into noble attitude.
yeah, because if you give
But
that
wrong attitude
freedom
is
of
in fact
choice to somebody who doesn't have right attitude, they're likely to harm themselves and others, right?
absolutely.
So, yeah.
That's exactly what we mean by someone trying to use the Sangha as a hiding place for some wrongdoing, because they're trying to get away from not paying their bills, trying to get away from the police, trying to get. There was, in fact, a case in the United States where a guy ordained and became a Buddhist monk, and it came to find out that he was wanted by the FBI.
Yeah.
And he became a Buddhist monk to try to hide from the FBI. Didn't work.
Wow. Right.
But it worked for a while, worked for months.
Wow. So I get the
Because
idea
he
that
was down in California and then got into North Carolina and got people within the Sangha to get his transportation arranged for him. And he was able to do that all under the radar. And the FBI was out looking for him. They eventually caught him, though, because they knew what they were doing.
Right.
But the Sangha didn't know that. That was something, and basically what was going on when he was caught up with and removed, the Sangha's attitude about that was not, oh no, we've lost one of our guys. Our attitude was, wow, we knew that was coming.
Right.
We could see that happening.
Yeah, the Sangha, I think, is not exclusionary in the sense that people who do not have right attitude are not invited. It's more like, those preliminary practices that people do. So the Sangha kind of encourages people to do the work that needs to be done for them to get included in the Sangha.
Absolutely. The only way to join a Sangha is by moving in on them.
Yeah.
Robes are optional, and robes come later. But if you're not living, I lived at Wat Suan Mokkh from middle 1983, and I ordained in December 1984. I was there for almost 18 months before I ordained.
Wow.
That's a major point, that in fact they require it now. What happened to me was just natural, because Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and Ajahn Chah and that crowd, they knew what they were doing. Now they actually have specifications that if you're going to be a monk, you, number one, come and live in a wat for a year as a layman, and then number two, you ordain for another year as a samanan, and after 2 full years, one in yellow robes as a student or as a child monk, then you can have full ordination. That's how they actually, that's the way that the Bureau of Religious Affairs wants to do it. Right. And in the process, they've also kind of specified that and put Wat Pananachat as the target for that. So basically the way that it could be done is that someone would come to live here and spend their first year at Dham Kiem under Ajahn Mehta's guidance, and then move to Wat Pananachat and ordain up there, and then he could go a year after that and ordain any place that he wants to.
Okay.
And so that's also the setting up of the Upajjhaya, because who is the Westerner's Upajjhaya is an extremely important piece of information for some reason within the Sangha.
Upajjhaya is like supervisor?
Is the preceptor.
Right, okay, yeah.
Okay. That the Buddhist ordination now is a formality that requires, or let us say, it doesn't actually physically require it, but that it is so common that it's, it's an unofficial point that it takes 20 monks for an ordination.
Wow.
This is Sangha. I mean, we're talking about family here. If you're going to join a family, you need to join the whole family. And so even in places like North Carolina, where we have to plan ordinations well in advance to make sure that we can get 20 monks as a quorum. And so we set up months in advance so that monks from all over the place can come.
Wow.
By the way, I had about 45 monks at the ordination that I had something to do with in North Carolina. So that whole thing is part of it, of how big a whoop-de-doo can we make here. Another one is when a temple is ordained, and during those years there was a lot of new temples showing up in the United States. And so I went to the ordination, and 2 of them in Atlanta, one in Connecticut, another one in Rhode Island, another one in Wisconsin.
Wow.
And all of that, just a lot of different new temples coming in, and so they all want that huge number of monks to show up. One of the photos that my mom kept in her bedroom was a big display like that showed me way off in the corner but easy to see because I was the biggest dude there. That was more than 100 monks at that ordination. This was an ordination of a temple in Atlanta, big Lao temple, and there everybody, I mean, everybody was there. Basically, almost all the monks that we could find was at that.
Huge family.
So, big family. So in that ordination for the individual, you have the upajjhaya and the achan. The achan is going to be, not only do we use the word achan like achan this and achan that, achan po and achan sameto and achan amaro and achan santikara, all of these achans there are using the name differently than it's used in the ordination. That basically the word teacher means something, anybody can be a teacher, and we give them that respect because they are the teachers. But in the ordination in Thailand that I'm talking about, the upajjhaya was the Samdet Sangharaj of South Thailand, the most important monk in South Thailand, and the achan was Achan Po. So Achan Po has a different relationship to me than any other achan, that he is my achan. He is my teacher, okay? And so Achan Po was there in the ordination. I got a lot of photos about that if you guys want to see them. And Kesha Thero was the upajjhaya, that they make a point, especially for the Westerners, to have a very, very high-ranking, most important monk that they can find to be the upajjhaya.
Right.
That's very, very typical, that in Thailand that ordinations are like that. In fact, there's one story that is unverified. It's just a story that I heard. But Bhikkhu Buddhadasa has been the upajjhaya for only one person in his entire life. He finally did succumb to political pressures. You know who he ordained? The son of the present prime minister. That's who Bhikkhu Buddhadasa ordained. They pressured him. And so that's how that part of ordinary Buddhism is part of the Sangha, that the Sangha uses all of this status stuff to its advantage, rather than saying that, oh, we cannot be status symbol, that you're a Westerner, we want the lowest class upajjhaya we can find because you're a piece of dirt. No, you're a piece of dirt, therefore we want the best upajjhaya we can find. That in fact, one of the high-class upajjhayas, the really big one, is Achan Panyananda, who is the chief monk, the abbot of Wat Chulapatan, the largest temple in Thailand. The largest, like 3,000-4,000 monks stay at his temple. And guess who got ordained under the upajjhaya of Achan Panyananda? Robert Bucknell, Santikaro, almost all of the ones who came to Bhikkhu Buddhadasa, they got ordained in Bangkok, and I got the southern treatment.
I see.
So
But
anyway,
I have a question.
that's part of the status of it. But even with that kind of, those are the kind of things that glued me so tightly into the Sangha, that this became my home. That in fact, that's another reason why they call it a change of lineage. because we change our lineage from our old birth family.
Right.
Now our real family becomes the Sangha. The Bhikkhu Buddha Dasa Nachan Po is my mother and father, or maybe Kesa Thero, the preceptor, would be my grandfather, that kind of thing.
Right.
Because he was really old. The last time I saw him, by the way, was in 2002, and at that date, he was 107 years old.
Wow.
Not a world's record, not well known, but he was an old man.
Yeah. Wow. I'm pretty sure he maintained his cognitive faculties better than anybody else could, because he was so aware probably, and using all of that repetition and connections that we were talking about in our previous talk. Remember?
Mhm.
So,
Yes.
yeah, it doesn't surprise me that he was so well at that point in his life.
Yes, that's exactly how it operates, is that bringing that mind,
Yeah.
that wisdom, or bringing that frontal cortex and putting that to use to
Yeah.
bring one in charge of one's life rather
Mhm.
than subject to the power of the instinctual
Absolutely.
mind of doing it. So anyway, the important part about this conversation is that there are also stages above the waterline.
Yeah.
That in fact above the waterline you will have at least 7 stages for the Sotapan. A lot of people in the West, especially on Reddit, and there's a stream enters group, the Sotapan there, and there's one after another who will come in and say, "I'm a Sotapan," or "My teacher said I was a Sotapan,"
Right.
or that kind of stuff. So when students ask those kind of questions or tell me that their teacher has said that they were a Sotapan and all of that, the basic thing to do is to start asking them questions, because generally the Westerners are not deep enough into Buddhism to know that there are absolute stages that a person passes through in the noble path. But this staircase that we were talking about is actually very, very well laid out and understood. And for some people, you could say that the way that it seems to be taught, you've heard this probably before, and that is the sequence of the word Sila, Samadhi, Panya.
Yeah, I think I have
Sila,
heard it from you, yeah.
Sila, Samadhi, Panya. The Sila actually then is behavior, and that's based upon a set of rules, rites, rituals, that when you become a monk, that you've got to behave like a monk, you've got to operate like a monk. Well, actually, the behavior and the operations of the monk is to get the young man to start acting nobly, because if he's required to act nobly, then that means that he has to think about acting
Yeah.
nobly, and he puts him in the right thought or right frame of mind. But we can expand that to the point of saying that this Sila that we're talking about does not have to last for years and years, that all we need to do is to get the mind right now secluded from all unwholesome behaviors. Which means that's the seclusion part, that the reason that people go and sit down in a meditation hall is so while they're sitting down in the meditation hall, they at least are not stealing donuts out of the kitchen.
Yeah, yeah. But I hear you. It's easy to get lost in that behavioral preparation, right? People would often take a self-care day and they would think of going to a spa, and driving the way to the drive, to the spa is often going to be really stressful, so that by the time they reach the spa and their self-care day has already been spent half, and they're stressed and none of their goals have been met. So yeah.
Exactly. And you think that it's stressful going to a spa, thinking how about stressful it is for some people to sign up and go to a meditation retreat. People
Yeah.
are really stressed out. I mean, Debbie, you know who I'm talking about here.
Do I?
Yeah, that Danny was really stressed out when he
Oh,
went into that retreat. He was so
did
stressed
tell
out that
me.
I thought twice about it, and then I said, "Well, let's let him go."
Yeah,
But I
yeah.
was actually on the verge of pulling him off of that bus.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Just say, "Daddy, you're not ready for the retreat. You don't have the right attitude. You're still in England. You need to chill, baby, before you have the right attitude to go to that retreat."
Yeah.
So yes, that's the whole thing. And that's the problem with these retreats is that people go into these retreats uptight and not ready to go. They don't think about the retreat as, hey, I've got 10 days with nothing to do and no place to go, and I can just hang out and chill and just enjoy myself. But no one goes there with that attitude. Everybody goes with the attitude of things are strange. I don't know what to do. Will I fit in? Can I do the right thing? Am I up to the task? Or the other side of it is that, oh, I'm going to do a lot of work here. I'm really going to get my mind straightened out. And so
Mhm.
everybody goes to the retreats generally with the wrong attitude. And then at the end of the retreat, when they come out of it, they don't have a continuing support.
Right.
Because they paid for the retreat, they have nothing as a preparation. They come into the retreat, they do the retreat, they've got problems in the retreat didn't work out the way that it should have worked out, and
Yeah.
now they leave the retreat after it's fully paid for, and what do they got? They got nothing. Maybe sign up for another retreat. Now that's different than the way that it would be in the Sangha, where the young man just wanders into the temple and makes friends and sits down, and they start teaching him about some meditation, and he starts to hang out at the temple more and more, and then he's been 10 and 20 days in the temple and whatnot like that, and he decides to go home, but then he can come back any time that he wants to because it's all family now. And that's why the retreat model is not working. It doesn't live up to the expectations that we need in Western Buddhism, as the retreat model is a failure of a model. We need
Right.
better models.
So I think the key words here are expectation, and the right attitude would be experimentation, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm just transposing this to a workplace scenario. So sometimes we have this idea that when we are going to our workplace, office, or whatever, we need to be perfect. We need to be, we need to do the task perfectly, and that can produce sort of anxiety and restlessness, worry, and all of those negative biases. Instead, we can choose to just go there as an experience. Just I'm gonna go and see how I do this task without that expectation of having to do everything perfectly. If we engage in the task with a learning attitude, that okay, I'm gonna learn something out of it, a skill development attitude maybe, then I think it'll be helpful to balance out those nervous tendencies with enjoyment. Do you think?
Exactly. Yes, exactly. But the problem then is that by the time the student gets to orientation, they're already got the wrong attitude about it. How can we set up the retreat so that the people start the retreat with the right attitude about it? That's part of the problem that I see with the retreats, as well as the follow-up. But anyway, let's not spend the rest of our time trashing Western retreats, as opposed to the Asian model of just moving into the what.
Yeah.
You originally had a question
Yeah.
that was associated with your job, and there was a particular word that you used.
Oh yeah, assertiveness.
Assertiveness.
Yeah.
Before, I think I don't know if I missed it or whatever, but you were talking about Sotapannas, and then you started talking about Sheila, and then we ended up here.
Oh, you
What
want
was the
me to
point
go
about
back and touch
Sotapannas?
on the 7 aspects of what it needs to become the Sotapan?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I can touch on them right quickly. Okay,
yeah.
the first point is the first step of the path. The first step of the path that is a noble step actually is quite a high bar, but it's only the first step of Sotapan. And the first step on the path is when the student is far enough within his meditation and skilled enough in practicing correctly so that he knows over and over and over again that no matter what his mind is doing, no matter how clouded, or no matter the situation that's forcing him into that clouded mind, like being arrested. When people are getting arrested by the cops, they generally are not their sharpest, right? Okay. When we're sick, we're generally not at our sharpest. So this actually takes some training so that we know that no matter what situation we get ourselves into, that we in fact can have that sharp mind. We can pay attention to what's going on. We can live in reality, and we're not going to have obstructions. The obstructions of fear, of doubt, of wanting something, of not liking the fact that you're getting arrested and that kind of stuff. It's all what we call hindrances. So the first step of the Sotapan is when the student has the self-confidence, the shraddha, or the right attitude. And that attitude is no matter what happens, I can handle that situation. I'm the boss here. I'm the king. I can do anything because I'm in charge of my own mind. Okay, so that's the first step of the Sotapan, is the one who has the self-confidence that he can get himself out of any mess that he gets himself into. That's a pretty high standard, isn't it?
Yeah.
and it all has to do with one's own internal attitude about things. And that the Buddha then says that this attitude, that I know that I can get my mind cleaned out no matter what. He says that this is noble. It is a step on the path. It is super mundane. And by far and above all others, it is not held by ordinary people. Most people do not have that kind of confidence. Very, very few. And often they have the confidence built upon the success of getting away with it. So often this attitude is more of a wrong view. And the right view is ordinary right view is always filled with doubt. But this noble budding attitude is, no, I can handle anything. Even though I don't have the skills to do it, at least I can handle it mentally.
Right.
Okay,
I have a question.
Yes.
In order to handle something that you got yourself into, any mess that you got yourself into, I found this way of thinking that I am the creator of this whole thing. What that happened to me is powerful. Is that the correct attitude, or am I like?
That's exactly right. And we can use ordinary religious language that sounds magical, where in fact it's pointing at direct reality. When we say things like, you were created and placed on this earth to be a creator, to be a carpenter, to be a designer and manipulator of your own heaven here on earth. That's your job. That's why you were put here, is to figure out for yourself how to create heaven on earth. That's the attitude of a Sotapan. Now, it sounds magical in his way of speaking, but that's it, is to recognize that, hey, you're here to create your own universe. You're here to create your own heaven. It has not to be given to you. It's to be made. It's to be manufactured. And you've got all the skills you need to do it.
No pressure. Yeah.
Right. And in fact, the pressure is what we put on ourselves when we think we can't do it. But when you have the attitude, I can do this, there's no pressure. Or if you do put pressure on yourself, you can say, I can handle that pressure. After all, I put it on there. I can take it back off. I can tweak it back and forth. I can check how much pressure I can put on myself and handle
it. Or if you have an expectation of how that heaven should look like, should.
Okay. Now, this is only the first step of the Sotapan, is that self-confidence that I've got this wired, that no matter how obstructed my mind gets, it doesn't matter how bad I get myself into a mess, I can get myself out of that mess mentally right now. Okay, and we can use all kinds of examples of that because we've got all kinds of situations we can get ourselves into. An example of that is the mother-in-law is yelling at us. Okay, I can handle that. I can give her what she wants.
Yeah.
Okay. How about the judge is pounding his gavel and say you're guilty? Okay, well I can handle that. Yeah, I probably did it. My job was to make good friends with this judge, and I wasn't very successful at it. So of course he's going to find me guilty. He's going to be finding me guilty of being unfriendly. Never mind what happened months ago that the cops drugged me in here. In fact, the cops drugged me in here because I didn't handle the cops very well.
Right. So again, it's recognizing those learning opportunities, right?
Precisely. That is, in fact, step 4. Let's jump to step 4. Before, let's visit step 3 a little bit. And step 2 has to do with how strong your samadhi is so that you can see exactly what it is, because what we're really looking for is dukkha nirodha. And when we come to the point of beyond a shadow of a doubt, we know that that's the only job that we've got to do, which is back to that creator. The only job we've got to do is to make a heaven out of this hell that we find ourselves in. That's the only job that we've got to do. Okay. Then comes step 4. And that's step.
Sorry, I'm just going to ask one quick question. So would you say step 2 is like an antidote to doubt?
Actually, step number 3 actually labels it that way.
Oh, okay.
And that one of the ways that you can say that is knowledge and vision of what is and is not the path. Now, when we say the word path here, we're actually talking about knowledge and vision of what your life is and what it is not.
Right.
Or knowledge and vision of how to live this moment and how not to do it. Because how not to do it would be all of the ways that we have been taught to do it.
Mm-hmm.
All the lies we've been told, all the rules that we have, all of the supposed tos, all the pressures, all of the that sort of stuff is not the path. And that we know that beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah.
Because then we can start practicing what is the path, which is this step 4 that you were asking about. And that step 4 is then being willing to see our faults, to be willing to make mistakes and to enjoy them as learning experiences. And yet we are taught in our society to hide from our failures, to hide from our mistakes. When the child gets out on a 10-point quiz, he gets 8 out of 10. The 2 that he missed becomes the big issue, not the 8 that he got. And so we go around looking at losses, we look at mistakes, and we say that they're bad and whatnot, rather than seeing them as learning opportunities. But here now we've got a complete change of mind. And that complete change of mind is that, oh, mistakes, yeah, let's make a few. How are we going to figure out how to do it? An example that I use is Edison, with his statement about making an incandescent lamp. And by the way, there was a lot of competition. They knew electricity, and they knew they could sell a bunch of it and make a huge amount of money if they could only figure out a way of using it.
Yeah.
And electric lights was the big item, the big ticket item. And so out of that competition to get the light bulb going, Edison said that he had 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. This is exactly what we're talking about here. When we see our failures as perspiration, that means we see them as failures.
Right.
But if we look at it in the sense that we've got 100 things that we got to try out here, we've got one of them, let's get the next one and the next one and the next one, and finally we get through the list and we'll figure out how to do this. In fact, they found out that it was a tungsten filament in an argon gas. Because argon, by the way, is a noble gas. It does not mess around when things get hot.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's what's able to keep that light burning is because that tungsten filament could stretch. That's why it was tungsten, is because with the heat, it goes back and forth, but it never collapses or burns out or anything like that because it's never oxygenated, because the gas that it's in is noble. So that's a very interesting story about that, because we can begin to live our lives that way by recognizing that, oh, if we're going to have a light go on, we're going to have to try a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Let's use that as a learning experience rather than as a series of failures,
Mhm.
even to the point of absolute wrongdoing. So in the sutras, the Buddha talks about actually for the student to go to his teacher for confession with the understanding that he's going to learn from that, pay the retribution, get over it, and learn from that mistake.
Right. So we switch from the guilt and shame perspective of dealing with mistakes to a learning perspective.
Precisely.
And that is likely to increase one's learning ability because you're not paralyzed with guilt or shame. Yeah.
Ta-da! So now we come back full circle about that.
Yeah,
Exactly right. Because we are willing to look, because we're not afraid of what we're going to see, because we don't see things as failures anymore. We see everything as a success, which is the right attitude. I can handle this. You see how all of this stuff begins to work together. Well,
Yeah.
with that attitude, also the attitude comes with, hot diggity dog, this Dhamma stuff is good stuff. I might start living my whole life like this. And that's when the really enthusiastic part of the thing starts kicking in step 5 and 6, is when we become really dedicated to the Dhamma. There's really nothing much else to do.
Mhm.
And then step 7 on top of that then is what they would call the word that's used in the Pali is actually the word Nandi. But Nandi or Nanda has a different kind of quality in India. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, a cow.
Nanda is also used for carnal lust and things like that. Well, the same thing is true with the word rato, ratana. Okay, so the sutta winds up then talking about that step 7 of the Sotapanna is one who is absolutely delighted with the Dhamma. That's the only thing he
Right.
really cares about. That he's absolutely into it.
Yeah.
That it's his delight. That he finds delight therein, and we're always looking for delight, and you can always find the delight in the Dhamma.
Mhm.
That in fact, another way of looking at it is by recognizing that the Dhamma, when we're talking about it and speaking about it this way, is really good stuff. It is actually wholesome. And
I
because
was just going to
it,
say that it by that stage, I think the dopamine connections are so strong that you're practically seeking enjoyment out of making mistakes, learning, and exploring more and more. So it's
you
a
got
shift
me.
from yeah.
You got it.
Yeah.
Right. So
Can
we
you-
learn to control the dopamine in our own mind, but we do it naturally.
Yeah.
Can you be delighted with the Dhamma while being a layman
But
in the
at the
regular?
same time, as what?
Can you reach that? Can you take that 7th step to be delighted with the Dhamma without being in the robes?
Yes, absolutely. Ta-da! Now, let me say it this way. How many different ways are there to be able to drive a car? At some point in everybody's life, in the beginning, we're completely afraid and all of that, but there will come a time when you're driving the car when you're absolutely delighted with the fact that you've got freedom now.
Yeah.
Yeah, even when driving a car, there is an absolute delight with this thing. Wow, I can drive, you know. Okay, well, that's the stage of the Sotapanna, is the one who is ready to go jump in the car at any possible moment.
Right. And that pleasure is, I think, different from these immediate gratifications of, watching Netflix or something like that, because it sounds like a meta level happiness or pleasure or dopamine kick that is attained at this level. You are just delighted by the whole process rather than the goal.
Uh-huh. Now, I will ask you something that seems a little bit related. Let's talk about olfactory and air and other things like that, and ask you also about what is called the bonding chemical, or the bonding between an infant and her mother when they first meet, okay? Is it possible for anything about dopamine in the brain to have any possible effect upon saliva. The answer, well, of course, is yeah, it's only a couple of inches away. Of course, dopamine is going to wander into the saliva when you've got a lot of dopamine. Well, isn't tiny droplets of saliva and other things like that how a virus is spread?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, isn't it then possible for someone who is full of dopamine to stand on stage and tell jokes and everybody gets a really big kick out of it and goes into a great deal of joy?
Yeah.
So, in a way, dopamine is spread. The question is, can we spread it through the internet, or does it have to be face-to-face?
It can happen both ways.
I think so. I think that there's as much a psychological component, but I do remember having the feeling that just being in the company of Bhikkhu Buddhadasa was something useful.
Yeah, I think
that the only way that I can put
talk
it back to that
imitation.
it must have been his outbreathing. It must have been something that was in the air around him that he was putting out. Because there was something about it, but it was not magical. It seems magical because we've got no way to understand it or measure it or anything like that. But these are the kind of things that are possible. That when one person has a lot of dopamine, he can spread it to another person. This is exactly what we're talking about with teaching the Dhamma, that people, when they are listening to the Dhamma and absorbing the Dhamma, they're having almost completely wholesome thoughts. When they're asking a lot of questions, that's not necessarily the case. But when the students are really listening to the teacher teach the Dhamma, then they get it. And they get it in a way that now their mind becomes in a complete wholesome state, which means they're on the way to first jhana just by listening and paying attention. When the dopamine is out there also, that means that they begin to pick up on that on the psychological level. They begin to gladden and having happy thoughts. And so you can actually talk someone into first jhana, and you don't have to call that hypnosis.
Yeah.
But first jhana is actually possible through the teaching. In fact, at least two of you are in the first jhana right this very minute, because you could tell. I mean, it's like, yeah, this is really good. Feels nice. Okay. So this is
it took me a while to get here in the first jhana. It took me a while.
Yeah, it's delightful. It really is. So when you get that delight is part of the first jhana, is that everything is just so delightful. Everything is so marvelous. All right. So the first jhana, in fact, and the sotapan are interrelated deeply. That in fact the sotapan, is one who is of the full fruit of sotapan, is one who is practicing first jhana quite a lot. And if he's lucky, he can catch it when he's not.
Right. What is quite a lot? What do you mean, like daily basis? Or we're talking about several times a day?
Well, when the mind wanders away, how long does it wander before you see, aha, there you go?
I see it immediately, only it almost, I feel like, oh, I can feel that slipping away, and sometimes it's hard to come back, to get myself out of it. But I feel like this connection is faster now.
But that becomes here's that point. Referring back to the Eightfold Noble Path that we've talked about so much, and this is the issue of right effort. What is one's right effort? The answer to that is that one's right effort is a skill to be developed, so that when we first start practicing, it's a lot of effort because we're not skilled at it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. An example of that would be like carrying a heavy load. That when you first, as a child, you pick up something heavy, like Daddy says, hand me that wrench or hand me that hammer, and the child picks up that hammer, and it's really heavy for that child, Maybe both hands to pick it up and hold it, or maybe a coffee cup like that for a young child is heavy. But for Daddy, he grabs that hammer and he's twirling it around, okay? So this is the point about one's right effort, But the effort comes not just with muscle strength, it also comes with Dad's attitude, because he knows he's handled a hammer many times before and he's expert at it. And so his attitude makes the handling of the hammer easy. This is when a right effort becomes skillful. It becomes almost energetic, so that the child who had trouble handing Daddy the hammer, once Daddy's got the hammer, he can go bang, 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 bang like that. And he's expert at it. He knows exactly what he's doing. Okay.
Question.
This is, yes.
I almost have this feeling. I always want to try myself how long I can stay in that bad state, I would say. Like there's almost like a dare in this.
Okay, now here's the thing. When you start to come out of it, how long you can keep it going. When you start to come out of it, can you congratulate yourself for how long you were in? Or do you fuss at yourself for coming out?
No, I'm like, okay, it feels much better than now. And then I go back and I'm like, how long can I take this? And then I can, like, this is so bizarre.
You remind me of that.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Yeah, you remind me of a conflict I had. So I was trying to watch my mind wander from wholesome thoughts, right? And during the meditation, I was like, initially I was like, okay, my mind is going away, I'm bringing it back. And then I got confused because I was like, am I watching my mind wander off? Like, when I'm watching my mind, am I not also doing something? Am I triggering wandering my mind by watching it? Yeah. I was like, whoa, what's going on?
It's like a layer.
All right. And here's the wake up to that is, look at all the confusion I'm manufacturing right now when I could just be relaxed instead.
I eventually came around to that.
Seriously?
I don't have to figure it out. That's the whole quality that we're looking at, is you don't have to figure it all out. That you all need, all the knowledge you need is enough knowledge to really enjoy the moment.
So just breathe.
Okay, so in fact, what we can point at here is that in this system that we've been talking about, I've actually covered 3 of the fetters. I know what I'm doing here. Okay, but in the Buddhist cosmology or anything, there are actually 10 fetters, or 10 asava, or kin kalesa. There are 2 different words for it. They seem different. One word is kalesa, and the kalesa actually can be seen as a rope or a fetter or a bondage, or the let us say even a birthday present that's tied up with a bow. The tying up with a bow, that's it, okay? That's the fetter. We tie things up with bows. Now, the other word is asava, and the word asava has much more to do with an outflow, like a wart or a pimple or an obstruction on the skin. You could think of it as a pox, a blackhead, a pimple, an outflow. These are things, and then in fact, in that analogy, that's actually a good one, because when people have a bunch of blackheads or pimples on their face and they go to a dermatologist, does the dermatologist say, okay, they're gone? No. One at a time, either with a needle or with his fingers, or maybe a little thing like this. He's just popping one at a time, one at a time, one at a time. In this mind moment, one more alcohol, one more unwholesome thought, just one more. Got that one too. Oh, isn't that a beauty? Wow, that was a big one. Got white stuff and a little blood on it. Yeah, we can bump it. Okay, and one more. And so we can think of these asavas as that. And by the way, the last one on the list is ignorance. Again, the ajiva. It seems like that we start with ignorance. We have it in the second noble truth. We have it as the foundation of paticca samuppada. And what do we wind up with? At the very end of the tail is still ignorance again. But this time it's got a different influence on it. This time is, in fact, this is where we find out what the middle path is all about. Because too much ignorance leads into dukkha.
Yeah.
But there's always an end to it because you cannot know everything. You just can't know everything. In fact, here's something that I just saw in the news, just as an example. They started the survey because they began to notice the stars were disappearing. Now they go back and they've done the research in the past 100 years or so of astronomy. 700 stars in the Milky Way have just disappeared. They're gone. And that's not even part of our cosmology. We didn't expect our stars to just disappear. And yet they have, but we don't know why yet, okay? This is just another level of ignorance. There will be no end to human knowledge. Just no end to it. But we as children in our schools are taught that if you don't know, you're in trouble. You've got to answer the questions. And so we get into making stuff up rather than learning to be at awe with what we don't know. It is absolutely amazing, all the changes that have happened in psychology, and I really haven't studied psychology in 50 years, but when I did, I had it down solid, and I got a really good foundation, but look at what's happened since then. They're getting actually Buddhist.
I can't help, I have to point this out. So it seems like toward the lower rungs of the stair, it's like encouraging people towards more deliberation, right? And then
Anybody else lost Debbie?
skills to be
Yes, I saw you, Drew, but Debbie and Anya and Marcel all faded out. And now I still see. Now I see David. Debbie's back. Now I see Anna.
Everyone. I see everyone.
Marcel, are you moving yet? Yes, I see him moving. Not much, but he's moving. Okay, so we're back. Debbie, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So, like I said, it seems like towards the lower rung of the stairs, it's an encouragement towards more deliberation, towards more conscious, choice-based behavior. But when we come full circle to ignorance, it's also pointing out that we cannot control everything. So if we zoom out, it's more like a balance. We learn, develop a skill, but then we learn to accept the fact that that particular skill is not always going to be effective. Do you think that's
exactly so? So what we need now is to learn the definition and how to apply the word enough.
Right, yeah.
Now, when is enough enough? Okay, that's the way that we look at it. In some cases, some things are just not ever enough, like the next breath. I'll take another one, thank you, and another. But eventually, even that will be, oh, this next breath is just going to be too much work.
Right.
That's exactly how people died on crosses, and that's exactly how people die in the hospital bed from morphine. Is this next breath is just too much work, too much effort. So I think I'll forget this one. I'll give this one a miss, even if it kills me. It's just too much work.
All these jokes about death.
Okay, so in that regard, we can recognize that actually there's a story about how important this is because, as I told you before, part of Ajahn Po's training method with me, partly because of lack of English on his part and lack of Thai on my part, but he would set me up. The kind of ways that they would set me up were different than the ways that you hear about in Japan, but in the Zen tradition, the teachers often set up the student, like slamming the door in his face at particular times and other things like this. Okay, so Bhikkhu Ajahn Po did this with me, and one of the things that he would do would he'd come and stand outside my kuti, and I don't know how long he'd stand out there, but he'd stand until I got the load of the fact that he was there. which meant that I had to start waking up and start looking, because I didn't want my teacher to stand out for an hour while I was fiddling around and not paying any attention. He was quite capable of standing there for an hour just to see how long it'd take for me to wake up. So this is one of the things. Another one, just so much. I mean, I'm so fond of him. I got so much to say. But another one was that he would sneak up on me out of the blue and walk past me with a word. Now, sometimes that word would be tatata, which is the Pali word for be here now. Wakey, wakey. I just walked up to you. I was behind you. I walked up to you and whispered in your ear, and you didn't even know I was here. Wakey, wakey. And so I do that with my family. I do that with my 8-year-old daughter. I'll sneak up on her on a regular basis. Why? Because I learned that from my teacher. But another one that he would do when he would sneak up would be he would just come and just say, not sure, and just walk right off. Not sure. Okay, to teach that point of this is an investigation. Don't come to a conclusion. Don't rely upon knowledge. Rely upon investigation. Keep looking. Assume that you don't know. Assume that you're not sure and that it's worthy of an investigation, which is completely different than doubt, because doubt is when we don't know and we're afraid to look.
Yeah.
We're afraid of the answer. We don't want to know. Then, in fact, here's a good example of that. In a horror movie, this happens in every horror movie. They're playing really weird music, and someone, like a young lady or maybe a teenage girl, is walking down a hall that is dark, and they're playing this kind of music. And everybody in the audience is saying, don't go down that hall. Don't go down that hall. Don't go look to see what's going on. You know? That's the feeling that we have. Don't look. Stay afraid. Don't, well, it's dangerous down there. Don't look. And often in those things, when she does go through that door at the end of the hall, there's nothing there. It's a letdown. It's part of the buildup of the scene, and so this is not the dangerous moment. But the movie makers, they know how to control people's feelings like this. Okay, so this is that point. This is an amazing aspect of doubt, is because we do not do an investigation, because if we did, that would dispel the doubt. That's why we want to actually, in our practice, to change our doubt into curiosity. Why? Because curiosity is willing to look. Doubt doesn't want to. Doubt's got fear in it.
And that highlights that okayness that you were talking about, that supreme okayness, because doubt has that quality of you're not going to be safe. You're not okay. Safe. The curiosity is like, I'm okay and I can take the risk of looking.
Right, exactly. Back to Eric Berne. I'm okay here.
Yeah.
That okay corral that he invented is just so powerful in this regard. Are we going to be okay enough to treat everybody else as if they're okay too, even when they don't think so? Is everybody going to be friends here, or am I going to go around saying, I'm okay, but you're not okay? But most of the time, if we go around the other side and say, well, I'm not okay, will you please help me? Maybe you're okay.
Yeah.
Or the worst of it is the criminal, which says, well, I'm not okay, but neither are you. Bang, bang. And so, that treating each other as okay because we can feel okay on top of the world. We're the winner here. We've got this wired. We can handle this. Which means that we can bring this conversation, if you will, back to the original definition of that word that you were using, assertive, right? Is that the word? Okay. The word assertive, by the way, has somewhere built into it the word sure. That when we're asserting something, that's because we're sure of it. Okay. The question is that if we are assertive, how are we going to be received? Sometimes we can be assertive and received well, and sometimes we're assertive and we get attacked.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and that's the trick. There lies the the okayness. We have to be okay to let people be defensive about their own issues. So it doesn't matter if I am assertive or not. If I'm not received well, that should be okay. Do you think?
Yes, and because it's okay, we can use that as a learning experience so that we can continue to try things. But if
Yeah.
it's not okay that we fail because we're too assertive, we go around saying, "Oh, I was so assertive and I screwed up. Oh, poor me." Okay, I mean that's the way that we expect it to happen. Is that when you're too assertive and you fail because of whatever reason, that the answer to that is okay. We're in charge of this machine. We can tweak it. We figured that out. In fact, we can actually see people as they're in the process of turning around. I mean, you know how fast psychology works, and that things don't happen. Everything blows up at once. I mean, even a bomb doesn't just go off all at once. Somebody had to go plant that bomb, set the timer, go find the explosive, get the battery, and put that thing together. And we do that kind of stuff. So even if somebody explodes over you being assertive, it didn't happen all at once. He was already a ticking bomb. So we need to see that too. So we have to plan on when we're going to be assertive and under what conditions and whatnot. And one of them is to make sure that our assertions is not because we feel threatened. That the real assertiveness is when we are absolutely sure, because we keep investigating. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we want to listen to our people that we're being assertive with, is because they may have some new information. But if we're so bent on getting our way, then we're going to perhaps screw that up. And so staying in the flow and listening things, because as you can tell, I often will refer back to students of things that they've said earlier in the conversation. That I always will use where the students have started as a point to, sort of like I learned this by watching Sea Hunt. Let's not get into it, but under the ocean, if you're looking for something, the thing that you want to do is point a stake in the ground and then circle around it and make a bigger and lighter circle. But you always leave that stake in the ground.
Right.
Okay?
So like a reference point.
Right. And so in this conversation, it's always been about assertiveness. And so we've now come around full circle back to that word, though we've been dancing around it by going off onto soda ponds and going off onto all kinds of places. But it really has to do back with this issue of, are we going to be alert and awake enough so that we can handle the situation wisely, handily, where I'm okay and he's okay. I do not have to be assertive because I feel not okay that he's winning, and so I've got to jump in and try to win the case. Oh no, if I'm feeling like I'm losing the situation, the trick that I use, and I've done this for several times, it works really well, and that is, well, I need a pee break right now. I'm going to the toilet. I need to get rid of something here.
Yeah.
I was just about to ask you.
Right, and you take a break from being threatened and feeling all those emotional turbulence within you. Yeah, completely.
Right, and then get yourself back together, and then come back into that meeting and let them have it.
Yeah.
Dhammarato, I have a question. What would be the best? Like, I know the excuse of going to the bathroom, but you really, like, there's a conflict happening, say, within a small space. How do you correctly leave? Because last time I did it, it was not pretty. I just it was pathetic. Actually, I was like, oh, I thought I was good enough, but no, I was so angry, and I just slammed the door and walked out.
Yeah, but you came back too soon, I guess, is what you're saying.
No. Actually, I did fine. I walked around, and it was fabulous that I left. But how do you leave correctly? Like, not correctly, I would say, how do you leave without making it even worse, or like making, I don't know.
How do you know it was made worse?
Because
there's
then
your doubt.
I didn't speak to my aunt for like the whole day after.
Well, did she cool off in a day?
Yeah.
If you had stayed and argued with her for another 10 minutes, would she have cooled off in one day or would it have taken a week? These are the things we don't know.
Yeah.
So you're trying to outguess the road not taken, rather than recognizing that when you are in a tense situation, the best thing to do, and in fact that there are so many places in the sutras where this is the recommendation. When it is hot, get out of the kitchen. When you are holding a hot rock, withdraw your hand from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you are in an argument with someone, do anything you can to get out of it, even if it looks like a small social faux pas to get out of the conversation. That's probably going to be much better than staying in and making a big social faux pas.
So wait, so I'm actually judging myself on how I walked out right now. Like I'm actually giving
Yeah,
myself.
instead of congratulate yourself for walking out.
Well, and if you wanna do it more skillfully, then something that I do is I call out whatever I'm feeling. I say, I don't know why this argument or this discussion is bothering me a little bit, so I'm going to take some time off. Can we catch up later? That's a very neutral thing, and you're telling the other person.
Psychologists get away with that. You need to be a little bit more polite in normal society. Psychologists can get away with being that blunt. Because basically what you just said is, you just ticked me off and I got to get some space or I'm going to clobber you.
Yeah. But the person opposite is not going to feel threatened. So instead, if you say, you're pissing me off, they're going to immediately be defensive, right?
Yeah.
So I find it useful to say, I am bothered by it, so I'm going to cool off.
Mm-hmm. Right. And the words that can come out are something innocuous, something that's intermediate, something that's obvious. Like one of the ways of doing it, by the way, in a very simple way, is would you like to get a coffee? Here, let me buy you a coffee. And then we can distract them. And while we're walking to the coffee machine or whatever, we can change the subject. That's one of the ways to do it, is to get a diversion. If you're in a hot conversation with somebody, change it. Change it as soon as you recognize, because this is exactly meditation, isn't it? That when you see that something unwholesome is happening in the mind, you put something wholesome in the mind, okay? And if you need to take a hike to do that, then go take a hike. I got to go to the bathroom right now. I've been, this conversation's been so interesting. I really want to do it, but I got to go. And then you're gone. And so you're not blaming him for how bad you feel or anything like that. It's a call of nature, by the way, they call it.
Yeah.
And so that's why a potty break is often a really excellent way out of a tense situation.
Yeah.
That's a good advice, Dhammarato. I'll keep that in mind.
Another one would be, and this would be a silly one, and maybe people would even see through this one, and there's, I've got to go feed the parking meter.
Yeah.
That's another one that can be used. I got to go put some money in the parking meter or whatever like that. But anything that's not to do with the conversation that we're in, let's get out of it by blaming something else on the outside, because in fact you're doing yourself and the other person a great favor by doing this. Remember that the teaching of the Buddha is not about honesty. No. This is about dukkha, nirodha. Let's get out of this dukkha. Even if we have to tell a little white lie to do it, let's get out. And we want to tell a little white lie because the truth is going to pick this person off. We want to give him more dukkha with the truth. You know that much about him. Okay, so this is where friendship and wisdom override these harsh rules about thou shalt not tell a lie. Because sometimes a small lie is a very noble thing to do. It takes some wisdom, though. We have to look at what we're doing. But getting out of an argument, anything to get you out of an argument is the right way to go.
Yeah.
So, feed the talking meter. Got to go feed the dog. Got to go for the potty break. Oh, the mailman just arrived. Here, let me go take care of the mail. Anything. It doesn't matter what it is, but if you're in a tense situation and you have bad feelings about it, then allow yourself to have a break so that you can get away for 3 or 4 minutes, take a deep breath, reassure yourself of that first step of the soda fountain. I can handle this. I know I can handle this. I got tense. That's why I got out of it. Now I'm not tense. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what my grandma used to do when there was an argument? She was like, "Oh, my heart."
I was thinking that.
That's a good one, right? Old people can do that. That in fact, in 100 years ago, women would use swooning to change the topic. Yeah, they'd swoon. Oh, that's too much for me. And now the whole topic has changed because now everybody's taking care of the swoon. Yeah, so these diversions to get away from it rather than feeling that we have to protect ourselves. So that's one whole area of assertion that we can bystep or get past by getting out of the situation rather than feeling like that we've got to stand there and defend ourselves.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Because that's where most assertions are, is trying to defend ourselves because we're feeling like we're under attack. But if you're really sure that it's actually the truth, it's not me they're attacking, it's the truth that they're attacking, now we can friendly find a way of speaking of the situation in a friendly way.
This
And then
happened to
I
me,
think
But that's after the potty break.
And
But
then
be
I
sure the
think we
potty
can
break
remember
works because
that-
you can't have 3 or 4 potty breaks in a row.
Oh my gosh. This happened to me actually. I was out on the street doing some activism, and you know, normally people don't like what you have to say when it's the truth. And one guy came up and he got a bit, you know, angry, and I was just like, okay, I can't handle this. So I was like, oh, that's a really good question. Let me, you know, hey, my, you know, so like my friend Adam is like, hey, Adam, do you know how to answer this question?
That's it. That's what.
And then what happened? But this is the great thing, right? This is the great thing. So I was like, okay, cool. I can't handle this. I'll let someone more experienced handle this. Because I tried. And I was like, well, you know, this isn't working. So hey, Adam, my friend here has a really good question. And so I just went over to talk to someone else. And then the guy followed me. He's like, you're not getting away from me. You can't pass me off to your friend. At the
Wow.
end of all of it.
Persistence.
Yeah, at the end of all of it, I turned to my friend, and I told him, it's like, and this is my friend. He's quite wise, clearly, because I said, oh man, that guy was really angry at me, and he was like, no, don't take it personally. The guy was angry. You just happened to be around.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. He was not angry at you anyway. That you
Uh-huh.
bought that. That was your trip.
Which
Oh,
I was like,
anger
fair enough,
coming
fair
by.
enough.
Here, let me stand in the way and catch it.
Yeah, I laugh about it now. I mean, I laughed about it just as soon as he said that. I started laughing about it, and then I was like,
That's
yeah.
right. That's the wake up. I mean, that's brilliant. That's really great. I'm glad that you were able to hear, because many people he could have said that to, and they says, "Oh no, he was angry at me."
Oh no, it was definitely not about me. It was definitely about
Not
like,
you. It was obviously not you, right?
Yeah, he doesn't even know you enough to be angry at you, right?
yeah.
So,
And if I can
Other
make someone
than
that
you were
angry
on
in
the
2 minutes, that's
wrong
pretty
team.
impressive.
That's all he needed to know. You were on
was
the
that?
wrong team. I said that's all he needed to know. You were on the wrong team.
yeah. But he was. So we can say that he was threatened by not getting an answer, and that may have triggered his anger, right?
Oh no, it wasn't so much that he wasn't getting an answer, as well as he was making a statement and I was asking follow-up questions and he didn't have the answer.
Ah, I see. Okay.
Oh, yes,
So
right.
he was very sure and
If
assertive,
you're
and I
going
was
to be
like,
the wise guy, you got to make sure that exactly. That happens a lot, by the way. That's
but
the
that's part of the,
Socratic method.
yeah.
And you know what eventually happened to Socrates, don't you?
Oh yeah.
He asked too many of the right questions to too many people.
Yep.
But he did some good along the way, right? And
Oh,
you know, it's a risk
definitely.
I'm willing to take.
He more or less prevented a war.
Oh,
Well,
did
it
he?
was a different
postponed one
time.
for
Though.
years.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, basically what his whole point was that he was trying to teach the youth of Athens that they could go have happy lives without joining the army.
Or politics.
But the old guard were angry at the Spartans. And the old guard in Athens were trying to raise an army so that they could go whoop Athens. And Socrates was going around town telling all the youth, don't join the army. Don't do it. That's dangerous. You wind up as a war victim. You wind up maimed. The government's not going to take care of you after you're out of the army. Don't join the army. That was Socrates' number one position, that he did it by asking all of the students all the right questions. Like, what's going to happen to you after you're out of the army? Will you make it out of the army? And people start to think about what's going on. And they stop joining the army because he was asking all the right questions. And then he wouldn't stop asking the right questions. There was a way out for him. He could have gone into exile. He could have left Athens, or he could have shut up. And he wasn't about to do either one.
He had the chance to escape as well.
He didn't try to escape. That's right.
No,
They
as if he
gave
had
him
the chance to. His friends, like, literally
Yes.
were able to get him, like, into, I think, where he was being held. And he's like, come on, let's go. He's like, nah.
even the guard was that kept him in the prison was kind of in on it. The guard himself would the prisoner. I mean, he was a prisoner in the jail, and the jailers were willing to let him go. I mean, everybody was willing to let him go. Even the aristocracy that had put him in jail, they were willing to let him go because they knew that he hadn't done anything. He just ticked them off. Oh, Debbie, you're back. Great.
Hey. I know we weren't being assertive, but I had to take a toilet break still, so.
I know. I was going to make a joke, but you beat me to it. Anyway, guys, this has been really a delightful conversation. I really enjoyed it, but it's about time to wrap up. Does anybody have any parting remarks? Any questions or anything? Marcel, it's been really glad that you've been on call with us today. I hope you've enjoyed it. You haven't said much of anything.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah.
It's not actually, but
That's some poor connection.
Yeah.
He's smiling.
Yeah.
That's
I got a
That's all that
beautiful smile. Well, Drew, do you have any parting remarks?
Nah, been fun as usual.
Yeah.
I'm hungry.
Yeah.
I gotta go. Nature's call.
Anya, I'm glad to see you again today, too.
Well, me too. I'm very happy to see you all again.
How's your move gone, Anna?
So I moved back to my hometown for now. After that, actually, that wasn't. Anyway, I'm planning to go back to the United States. And I attempted to buy a ticket online, and my credit card did not go through because I needed a 3-2 whatever step verification process. That's another issue. So I'm still at home. I haven't moved. No.
But not for long, hopefully.
No, I'm planning to do it sometime in October.
Best of luck.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Oh, no worries.
Debbie, did you get your question answered about assertive? We didn't dwell directly with it, but we certainly have danced around it.
But yeah, the entire conversation was, like you said, around it, right? So I got a revision of a lot more stuff, a lot more than I bargained, but it was brilliant. I love how supportive our community is. Like, I love these, how you contribute and give your ideas. It's very enriching. I love it, guys.
Yes, the Dhamma is just absolutely marvelous stuff. It's quite a toy to play with. I really love it. Okay, guys. Well, we'll see you next week, or if you want to, give me a call.
Thank
Marcella,
you,
I'd especially like to hear you privately if you want to. We can talk together.
Thank you very much.
It's Manuel, though. You can call him Marcel if you like.
Manuel. Okay, sorry, but my eyes are not all of that great. I have to go down and look at it. Emmanuel. Okay, I got that. And Drew. That's a really strange way to spell Drew.
It's got a V at the end.
Yeah.
I'm glad you told me because I would have.
Drew.
Dhammarato, you're talking about other people's names. Look at yours.
That's not my name.
Well,
It doesn't belong to me. It was a gift.
Ah,
yeah.
using that depersonalized.
From Kesatero. I mean, it's a prized possession, but it's not mine.
I don't even know what your actual name is, Dhammarato.
Nobody does. I mean, that's so old.
Is it a secret?
Change of lineage already. So Dhammarato is all we need.
Okay.
At one time, it was a wish fulfillment.
Yeah, call me Bond, James Bond.
Call me Rat, Dhammarato.
Oh my God. Thank you. It was great to see
Okay,
you.
guys. See you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Drew. Bye, Manuel. See you.